Just when I thought I was ready for the Texas Mile, I was talking to Floyd and he mentioned that the rule book does say that these pinch bolts are supposed to be safety wired. I've never had him call me on this before, but I figure it's easier to just do it now while it's in the garage versus out at the track. Fortunately, these pinch bolts have an external exposed head on the bottom of these Olins. So all I'm going to do is drill a hole in each of them from the inside out, which will be a lot easier because the bit won't walk on it, and then just run the wire through. All right, I've got those drilled on both sides. I've got a hole going out that way. So the bit went from the middle outward like that. Same over here. So now I'll take a chunk of the wire through the hole from that side. All right, now that's safety wired, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and air up the tires now. I'm going to put 45 in the front. And we'll put 54 in the back. All right, I'm not going to need a radar detector at the track, so I can take that off. I have this zip tie on here already, and that's for the purpose of zip tying the camera to the bike. If I remember right, you can't have a helmet cam on. I don't need a chin camera interfering with my ability to put my head down as low as I can. So I'll put the radar detector off to the side and go get my GoPro. I used my double-sided sticky body tape to stick the GoPro mount to my platform that I normally use for my radar detector. It's in such a way that it will capture the speed and the tachometer, as well as a decent view out the front of the windscreen. It's also off to the side a little bit, so from riding, I'll still be able to see my shift points and everything okay. And the only other thing is I'll have to bring an extra zip tie or two to make sure that I can secure the camera mount to the platform, to the bike, as I think that's required by the rule book. So that's set. The next task is I need to set the shift lights appropriately. So what I want to do is look at the ideal shift points as I run through the gears, and then I'll set up the shift light, which you can do on this bike in such a way that it'll start blinking at, say 13,000, and then it'll stop blinking at 14,000. So you get a little bit of an advance warning. You can see out of the corner of your eye, see the light blinking, and then once it shuts off, you'll know to kind of look down or get your timing right to be able to shift right away. So this is the spreadsheet I've kept over the years, keeping track of what sprockets I've had and where that should put me. And you can see right now in the dark green bar, I've got a 17 and a 44 on there. In theory, that gives me a 198 top speed at redline, which is 14,300 RPM currently with this 18 engine and the software I have on it. So that's where the limiter is going to be, which means I don't want to actually get to it and have the bike tack out on me. I want to control it myself for smooth shifts. And with the 1744 setup, I did 193.3 last time, so I should still have some room to go on that, and I'll start with that right out of the gate. As far as the shift points go, I've also done all the math, figured out where you're, for this 18 engine, the max horsepower should be at 13.5, and gone through and figured out that ideally I want to shift at 14.3 for the first 3 shifts, and then 14,160 and 14,000 for the last 2 shifts. So those are where I want to end up, which means I can basically set that shift light to come on at 13,000 and then cut out at 14,000. And that'll put me in a good range where I'll have some visibility and a little bit of advance notice, at least on these, where it's moving really fast anyway. Your RPMs aren't climbing as fast in the higher gears. All right, we're down to 21 miles with the fuel light on, which is good. I didn't want hardly any gas in there because I want to be on near empty. So when I get to the track and put the race fuel in, then that's going to give me the highest concentration of race fuel, get it out of its system, and eventually I'll be at pure race fuel. This also means I can use that range to tell me not to put too much gas in it. fluids are heavy and I don't need to weigh it down anymore with a full tank of gas. Turn the bike on. The next thing I need to do is try to get my position as streamlined as I can. When you get to these kind of speeds, it's more about drag than weight. So yes, I've been trying to lose all the weight I can over the past couple months, but it's also important to sit in a way that gives you the least drag. I've done all this work to get rid of the lights and all the cracks and make it as streamlined as possible for the body kit. I also need to make sure that I'm sitting in the ideal way too. This is a pic that was taken as I was going down the runway somewhere after the half mile. So this is probably doing speeds of upward of 160, 70 range. It doesn't look too bad. I've got a nice line that comes up the windscreen and then it meets the top of my helmet, comes around back to that spoiler, meets the hump on the back of the suit, comes down and then hits the tail. Now you'll notice the old tail had the license plate yet, and there were still all these cracks around the headlights that were causing drag as well. So that's been streamlined because that's all just one big piece now. You have a lot less crevices everywhere to catch air. You also have a shorter tail with no plate or any kind of light, so it's going to be more streamlined back there as well on the exit. And the fact that you've lightened it up with a lighter subframe, you have lighter also because you've gotten rid of all this headlight housing and the tail lights and blinkers and everything as well. So one thing that was pointed out to me is there's this big gap between my head and the tank. Ideally, I want to be laid down as much as possible to this thing because you want to have as small of a profile as possible going into the wind to catch as least amount of air, and that's going to let you go the fastest with the least amount of drag. So what I want to look at is some camera shots and see if there's a way that I can put on the gear and I can get my head lower. The challenge is you want to be able to see forward yet because you have to see the 1 mile marker out here so you don't blow past it and end up in the weeds. And at that speed, you move pretty fast sideways across the track if you're not watching where you're going, and you do want to kind of follow the right path. Last time this track was pretty bumpy, and so you kind of have to pick your path and try to stick to it. Now, yes, I, in the past, have actually laid my head sideways on the tank to try to minimize the drag, but that's really not a bright way to do it, but it's always an option as well. So let me start with this and see what I can do to maybe make it possibly cocking my head back more, and allowing a more frontal view through the screen might help me keep the head lower but still see well. So I'm going to go play with that in the garage a little bit. So again, what I really want is I want a nice streamline coming up here, the head as low as I can, have that stream come down the back and off the tail. So I want my ass shoved up as far back against this tail as I can, which lets me get as low down as I can, tuck everything in, roll the shoulders in, make sure the knees are coming up and then they're kind of pockets of the bike. So let's try position 1 like I would normally do it. All the way back, and this is kind of where I would see normally. I'm going to try to aim my head down a little bit more, so this is position 2. And if I do that, I'm hitting the shield and I can't see, my visibility sucks. I'm all the way back. So position 3 is I'm going to try to keep my head cocked up more. And this is about as much as I can do and still see. There's just not a lot of way to get that head all the way down without, I mean, that's about as much as I can see getting, and that's pushing it. Part of it is your neck is just not meant to bend quite that far. So maybe if I rotate the helmet up a little bit to allow myself to see more this way. All right, I'm gonna have to go look at the film on that and see how it looks. I've got a 44 sprocket on the S1K already. I've got the 43 and the 42 that I just mounted to the sprocket carriers recently. And now what I've done is taken the 41 tooth sprocket off the Aprilia, and then I just put the axle back through it. So obviously I can't ride it because I've got a loose chain and everything, but it'll hold the bike up so I can use the rear stand and take with me to the Texas Mile. So I've got the sprocket on there and these 3 other ones that allow me flexibility to climb up through the gears as I go faster. Looks like that fancy new belly pan could kind of use a drain hole. Don't need a lake floating down there weighing me down, so I'm gonna have to pop a drain hole back here somehow. It's one of the easiest mods so far. And with that, the bike is done, including being clean and waxed for less drag and more speed, of course. All ready for the Texas Mile tomorrow. 211.2, so down from 230 that I was at ablation. So I lost pretty close to my 20 pounds I wanted to lose. Super aggravated with myself because once I had the bike clean yesterday, I started looking and I realized even though I thought of it earlier, forgot that throat piece that goes between this intake and the actual intake inside here. Now, is it really necessary? Probably not. It'll probably still run fine, but it just bothers me having that piece missing. So if I can get it in there without stripping all the body work off again, I'm going to try to squeeze this in quick before I leave for tech check. Well, I finagled it in there, but unfortunately I had to take all this loose again, which means I got to fight all that plastic back on, which blows, but whatever. It's my fault for forgetting it. All right, so now at 9:50, the day I have to actually leave for the race, everything is finally together the way I want it. So I've got the battery tender on, just making sure it's got a fully charged battery. Everything should be ready. Now it's just a matter of gathering all the tools, things like the sprockets, the cameras and all that, and get ready to pack up and go. Hopefully don't need a ton of tools, but I've got everything I need to change out that rear sprocket, do safety wiring, basic sockets, some Loctite. Should be about everything I need, I hope, and of course some rags. If I get much beyond this, I'm probably in bigger trouble. Bike is on the trailer, strapped down, ready to head to the Texas Mile.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel below and let's celebrate turning fuel and air into adrenaline.